We've all heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. But the thing that we often forget is that it also takes one to support the mother.
Well, speaking of the village, this is our podcast. I'm Nicole Harlow.
And I'm Dawn Thompson. And we're here to connect you with a village of support you need from pregnancy to parenting.
So come on this journey with us as we build your village one episode at a time.
Hey, good day. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Dawn Thompson, and I'm with my lovely co-host, Nicole Harlow. And today our guest, Kelly Cox, is here with us, and we're going to talk about lactation and this amazing app that she has now called Share the Drop. Kelly, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Maybe you could just give a little bit of information about yourself real quick.
Yep. My name is Kelly. I live in Virginia. I've been here 20 years. My entire career has been spent focusing on how I can support women. I started off as a mental health therapist working with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I then transitioned completely over to a different life where I began teaching prenatal yoga. And then I just fell in love with that, became a doula, clearly obsessed with all things pregnancy, birth. And then a lot of life things happened and changed and shifted me into this direction of creating a peer-to-peer or informal milk sharing app.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, we could probably do 10 episodes on breastfeeding. It's a lot harder than a lot of people anticipate. And we don't have the village like we used to. Back in the day, there was someone who was always there with you by your side after you gave birth, a mom, a grandma, an aunt, a sister, relative of some sort who often nursed many children and who had a tremendous amount of experience and was able to be there day one when you started breastfeeding. But instead, we've got if most people are giving birth in the hospital and they have a nurse that comes in every so often, maybe, and then you get a shift change and the next nurse comes on and they're telling you something completely different than what the last nurse told you. And then you might get a lactation consultant to come in and she'll tell you something completely different than the other two people. And this is a common complaint in the current healthcare system while women are trying to navigate breastfeeding. And the statistics of women who give up in those first few days postpartum, it just demonstrates how critically important. And I'll just clear up this right now from the very beginning of this episode. I do believe that fed is best, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But the benefits of breastfeeding far, far, far outweigh. All of the research says it. I understand that there are certain circumstances where families literally cannot, but that's not what this episode is about. So, although it is actually when we're talking about people who can't get breast milk or their breasts are not working or whatever, but I want people to know that there are alternatives to formula, and we are not anti-formula here. Period. Okay, now we can move on with that little disclaimer.
But I like what you said. I liked about the village. Like, they're not just there day one, they stay, right? We used to live in these communities with all of our family and they stayed for weeks and months and we're always there to help. So, it's not just the first couple of days that are important. It is like I always say as a doula, the labor and delivery is the sprint. The feeding that first year is the marathon.
Yeah, for sure.
Ooh, for sure. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I also just wanted to, kind of share a little bit about how me and Kelly connected because it's a perfect intro to the app and to just, milk sharing in general. So for those of you who have been listening, you may know I'm a mom of 4. I'm currently breastfeeding my son, Dominic, who's 10 months. And we were going on vacation in September to Florida. And I couldn't find donor milk enough in New Jersey to successfully get me through that vacation, essentially. So I had posted in a Facebook group in Florida, and knowing that I probably, it was a long shot, but Kelly wound up commenting on that post, and then we connected, and I was like, wait, beyond me just needing breast milk, let's chat, because this is amazing. I both, for my daughter, who's 2.5, and for my son Dominic, I've used donor milk, and for whatever reason, 2 years ago, it was a lot easier to get it than this year, specific to like dietary needs and restrictions that I have with each baby, because that's different too. But it is not easy to navigate that, right? It's Facebook groups, or with my daughter, I was really lucky because a lot of my close friends were also nursing, and they matched my dietary needs. So I would literally just like be hanging out with them and be like, hey, can you, I'm a little empty. Can you take her? That wet nursing, that modern wet nursing, I guess you could say, was so cool to see and just like be part of in that village. And I'm really excited that this app is now existed, because Facebook groups are not always the most, I want to say, safe places, right? There's a lot of scammers and different like people that can access that. So let's talk about it. Why milk sharing is even a thing, and how, why undersupply and oversupply and, the perfect supply is, why there's so many variations, if you wanted to start on that topic.
I mean, breastfeeding is the hardest thing I think any parent goes through. I have been with thousands of women throughout pregnancy and beyond, and they worry about specific pregnancy issues. They worry about return to work and how it's going to change their relationships, but they don't spend enough time while they're pregnant thinking about breastfeeding. We kind of have this idea that breastfeeding is the most natural thing you're ever going to do. It's the whole reason we have breasts. And then for a myriad of reasons, it can be really difficult. I mean, some women can easily do it and it's perfectly fine. But a lot of women have supply issues. They don't have enough support. They have to go back to work. They may have to go back on a medication that they need for their physical well-being or their mental well-being. So there's always this population that just can't produce enough for whatever reason. They could have gotten sick during late pregnancy or early motherhood or something like that. And then there's this other whole slew of people who are parents who physically cannot produce breast milk. So one of the reasons I started this was because not only was I helping women through my own community use Facebook groups to get milk or share milk, and they were like, it's so clunky, it's so time consuming, it's just not working. But when I owned a yoga studio here, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And at that point, a lot of other women just kind of flocked to me and they're like, hey, I'm going through the same situation. I really want to be able to feed my baby breast milk, but how am I going to do this? And so I just kept saying, I'll help you. I'll do something. And I was doing it behind the scenes. And so that's part of the reason I built the app. I think that any other breast cancer survivor should have if breast milk is what they want for their child, they should be able to get it in a timely, quick manner, hopefully from someone in their community, to make the process not only quick and smooth, but start to rebuild those villages again. And then you think about anyone else who can't produce. So any parents, adoptive parents, if they can't lactate, people who use surrogates and don't have access to that breast milk, same-sex couples who literally don't have the anatomy to breastfeed, foster parents, anyone, any other caregiver caring for a child. So I wanted it to be, clearly it's kind of a woman's issue. A lot of things that we focus on supporting families during pregnancy is all focused on the woman, but thinking about babies being fed, that affects the entire family. And so I just wanted it to have a safe, easy to use, very quick space where families could connect. And though on the other side, people who have access, Nicole, you were talking about just that idea that was so cool to see, like wet nursing in action, that your community really can show up and share. And I'm assuming that those women weren't asking, well, what can you do for me? They just do it. So I get this question all the time about, one of our big safety features is we do not ever pay for donor milk. I think that is one of the best ways to keep it as safe as possible. But this question of, well, why would a woman just do that? And my answer is always, because we're women and we are the leaders of the village. We have been holding each other up since the dawn of time. If you want something done and done quickly and done well, ask a woman, right? But it's this altruistic giving back. Any woman I have ever met who has excess breast milk wants to share it. If their baby is gaining weight, meeting developmental milestones, they're like, I have too much, more than I can ever use. Please, like, use mine. And so I think it's like, this app for me is twofold. It is getting the babies fed, getting breast milk to families who want it, but also bringing back that village, that community, and we can raise our babies together. So one of the key features of the app is that when you create an account, you use your zip code, because I don't want, Nicole, you using it in Florida and then trying to get milk from someone in Oregon. Like, meet someone in your own community, avoid the shipping costs, and get milk to families same day.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the because obviously I'm sure you're getting some pushback about the safety of this.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, because I know there are some very fierce out there that think this is a terrible idea, probably. Like,
Yeah.
that the milk is not screened, the milk is not tested, like,
Yeah.
you don't know what if this person's been taking medication, you don't know if they're doing drugs, you don't know, like, all of these things. So what do you speak to those people?
Well, when you onboard, you have to agree to all of our terms of use, and that is open, honest communication, completely just open about your dietary lifestyle, your lifestyle. Do you drink alcohol? Do you smoke? Those kinds of things. You have to sign off you don't have any transmittable diseases. And then it is like, so I also, part of my grand idea came from a dating app. So thinking about what we do on our phones, we can go onto any dating app, create a profile, and then we have to make our own informed consent. So if I meet someone on a dating app, I'm not going to meet them in 5 minutes. I mean, that happens, but I'm going to ask the right questions. Hey, do we know anyone in common? Where do you work out? Or, for this app, it's like, who's your pediatrician? Did you use a doula? And so you have to vet them that way. Again, never paying for it, because that's when the danger really comes in. Upon onboarding, we ask donors, hey, are you willing to share any recent lab work you had with a recipient? Clearly, we don't upload that because of HIPAA, but if they say yes, we put a little medical icon on their profile. Recipients know that's one more thing to ask for. We provide guidelines on asking questions about how you pump, how you sanitize your parts. We say meet in a public place during the day. Don't go alone. But it's the same things about, like, I can call Uber and get into a car, some strangers coming to my house, picking me up. It's up to me to make sure that I'm making the safe, right decisions. And what, another factor is it's peer to peer. So it's one person talking to another person. We don't get anyone else involved. We don't get involved with the matches. You can't get on there and vet for a friend. It's literally ask all the right questions you need and make good choices for you.
Yeah.
We give information. You can buy testing strips for alcohol. We also give information about, if you are worried, you can do home pasteurization. So you can make this as safe as you need to be.
And like I said, I can speak from personal experience. Like, there's definitely people that I chatted with on Facebook groups that I just didn't get a good vibe from. And like, maybe they were far away and they were like, oh, we can ship it, but you just have to pay for shipping. And I was like, no, I want to meet you in person. Like, I'll never get breast milk shipped personally. And same thing, if I'm picking up by myself, I call my husband and like, he's on the speakerphone in the car. Like, even if it's a quick transaction, like, I've never seen this person, I don't know them, like, let's just be safe. So just like you said, with dating, with Facebook Marketplace, picking up anything else, like, we live in a society where we need to do our due diligence, and donor milk's the same. But like you said too, Kelly, the women who have the oversupply, they're looking to give it to help someone else, and they're not looking to hurt anyone. And I'm sure, yes, there's probably one bad apple out there that is like trying to be awkward and like, lie. But for what's the benefit that they have for not disclosing everything, right? Like, if I, personally, I don't want anyone who had a COVID vaccine donating breast milk, but there's plenty of women who will accept that breast milk. So if they can't help me, then they'll help someone else. And it's about that, component of it. I don't think there's no gain, right? Sometimes you replace bags or you trade diapers, but there's no monetary exchange. I always say if they're looking to sell it, like, go to the bodybuilders, right? Like, they'll pay for it. Let them be the ones to profit, I guess, off of it, but not other moms.
Yes, I totally agree. And there's a big difference between formal milk sharing and informal. So we are lucky enough in this country to have 33 formal milk banks. And so that works. Donors are thoroughly screened. They donate their milk. It's all pooled together. It's all pasteurized. It's the safest thing. Almost all of that milk goes to infants in the NICU, as it should. But when those babies go home or any other family needs donor milk, it can be really hard to buy milk from a formal bank, and it's very expensive. And so again, like, there's plenty of people who have excess and are more than willing to give it to a local mom. I have some friends here in town. They have a 7-year-old, and then we're struggling to get pregnant again, going through IVF. Turned out she had breast cancer. And so she can no longer have a child. And so they have a new baby via surrogate. And the baby came a little bit early. I had told her to get on the app before, like, start making connections, start talking. And so she calls me early from the hospital. He's here. He's a month early. You've got to go on the app and get milk. And this is one of my best friends. And I was like, no, I cannot do that for you. Like, you have to do it. These are your decisions. So she called an hour later. She's like, hey, here's this woman's address. Will you just pick it up? I'm like, absolutely. I'll pick it up for you. And I go, the woman opens the door. It's someone who had been in my prenatal class about 6 months ago. And I said, I had no idea you were doing this. And she said, well, I'm currently donating to 6 local families. And I was like, this is so great. Like, not only my friend is going to get milk, but my app is working. But in talking to this mom, she started telling me about her middle child. Her second child had a very rare form of cancer, and all that he could use was breast milk, like nothing, donor milk. That's what they needed. And that child actually passed away. She's gone on to have another healthy child, but she was like, I want to give back because donor milk helped me. And so thinking about who's donating milk, any woman who is feeding her child and sees that it's working, right? Her baby is thriving. So it's people who have used donor milk in the past. It's anyone who, I have donors who are just like, I never thought about doing this, but my sister was just diagnosed with breast cancer and her neighbor gave her milk. And so it started just these bells going off. And so, we just want to build better communities. And that's the whole reason that I want it to be as hyper local as possible. So Nicole, I don't know if you're able to find milk where you went, because we're not in every market, but I need everyone to know about me so that donors who sign up in Boise today can find a donor, right?
Yeah, and full transparency, we weren't able to find, and that area of Florida is super rural. The whole town is 7,000 people. So, and we wound up supplementing with formula, but very, very high quality, no seed oil formula, because I went down a huge rabbit hole with that. And back to Dawn, your fed is best. Yes, fed is best, but the stuff that they're putting in our formula is not always the best ingredients for our babies. And I mean, we can say the same thing about just food in general in America, right? But there are luckily some formula brands that are, based out of Europe, or things that are the best alternatives to breast milk. But donor milk, to me it was either, my milk is number 1, donor milk is number 2, and then these supplementation formulas is number 3. Again, just my personal opinion. If you guys are watching this, not listening, you can see I have my second born attached to me right now, and he was nursed for about 3 months and formula fed. My first was almost fully formula fed because I had different, things going on at that time, and, you got to do what you got to do. But then with my daughter, it was I was determined. I'm we're going to have, this breastfeeding relationship, and it still wasn't enough, unfortunately, for her or my son. And the donor milk, the wet nurses, all of the things, it's oh, I didn't even know about that with my first 2. And if I did, I totally would have done it. So I think that's really a key point as well, is people don't even
point. I didn't eat that.
okay. A key point as well is that people don't even know it exists, like that donor milk is a thing, or they think it's gross. Like, oh, someone else's donor milk, like someone else's breast milk, I don't want that. But it's like, no, it used to be a thing, like where other people would nurse your kids all the time.
It would be very common. And I love the fact that we're probably, I bet you there's somebody on here that's sitting in their car and going, I didn't even know this was an option, right? Like I had no idea this exists. And like, that's the purpose of doing this, is because it is something that isn't necessarily common knowledge. And,
Well, and pediatricians aren't going to recommend it. They're going to be like, oh, supplement with formula. You know, I remember the first time I told my pediatrician, like, oh no, she's on donor milk, you know, with my daughter. They looked at me like, what? I'm like, yeah, she's on donor milk. Like I have friends that, you know, give me their breast milk. And like, she was even shocked. So,
and you know, another thing is thinking about the cost of formula. Formula is really, really expensive, especially if you need like a very special formula, you know, based on allergies and things. And so if people can't, you know, when I first launched this, it was the summer of 2022 when there was major formula recalls. And I would just throw up a pic. Someone would send me a picture of their formula. Can you find this? I'd throw it on Instagram, and I was just the whole summer, just driving around counties, picking up extra formula, taking it to families in need. Like that wasn't sustainable. But then we've had a few more shortages since then. The price of everything is going up. And so what if you can't afford formula? And then what if the only one you can afford is something that really you don't think is good enough for your child? And so, you know, I do have a recipient fee to use the app. Donors never pay anything. I waive that fee if they're WIC or SNAP eligible, because I just want anyone who needs breast milk to have access to it, and in a way that they can afford.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love what you're doing. I know that, you know, and when I had my first baby, right, again, clueless, I didn't know anything. I was 20 years old, and I just thought, you know, I'm going to go to my obstetrician and he's going to tell me everything I need to know. I'm going to read the What to Expect When You Expect book, because that was what you did back then. My daughter's 30, almost 31. And then reality hit real quick, and I wound up having a C-section. I had been on Pitocin for many, many hours. I was having massive issues with engorgement. She was not being able to latch properly, blah, blah, blah. And then the worst part of all, so she'd been, you know, breastfeeding, and I was probably supplementing a little bit at that time, but I was finally breastfeeding. But it wasn't until I had a lactation consultant come. I had a lactation consultant because, of course, I had cracked and bleeding nipples, and like I did not know anything about that. I didn't expect it. Nothing. I just had no clue. I thought breastfeeding was just something natural. You just plop the baby on there and it just happened. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. And a lactation consultant came, got everything on task. But then I had a gallbladder issue, went to the emergency room with a massive gallbladder attack and infection. And I asked the ER doc, I said, hey, he's like, we got to put you on antibiotics. You're going to have surgery, blah, blah, blah. In like 2 weeks, we got to get this infection taken care of first. And I was like, okay, you know, of course. And I said, hey, but I'm breastfeeding. Do I need to stop breastfeeding if I'm going to go on these medications? And he's like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. Just supplement with formula. You can keep pumping to keep your supply up. And then once the antibiotics are done, you can start breastfeeding again. And I was like, okay. And then after the 2 weeks of being on, or not, you know, not breastfeeding and being on the antibiotics, and I started breastfeeding again, she wasn't having it. She would not go back onto the breast. And I had a lactation consultant come. I'm crying my eyes out. And she said, oh, honey, there was no reason. I wish you would have called me. There was no reason for you to stop breastfeeding. But that ER doc was young And that's not what he's trained in. He has no idea about lactation. He was never trained in lactation as an ER doc. He had no flipping idea. And instead of saying to me, I'm not sure, let me look into that, he just said no to protect his ass. And it completely destroyed my breastfeeding relationship with my first child. And I was devastated. And like, if I would have known about donor milk, I probably would have done it back then. I don't know that I would do the like wet nurse thing. I think at that time I would have thought that was weird. But of course, decades now into being doula, and I mean, listen, I'm a type A personality, 100%, and now somehow I'm a little more crunchy than I ever imagined I would be. You know, and this is one of those subjects. You know, like I have done the research to see how incredibly beneficial it is. I mean, when we start talking about the obesity epidemic, you know, can very well start with how our children start eating in the world. Is a big, and it's a big hot topic and a debate. So I'm not sure I want to dive into that, but you know, we try to stay as unbiased as possible in here and in this podcast so that it speaks to everyone. But that's my own.
Your point is really good. You get lactation support from a lactation expert, right?
Yes.
I went through cancer. I had very specific doctors. I didn't go to my GP and get, you know, he's not a surgeon. He's not going to cut this out of me. I mean, you go to the expert all the time and you practice within your scope. If you don't know the answer, refer them out to someone that does, you know?
And I say that about people go to pediatricians for lactation advice all the time, and they have had zero, their medical training in obstetrics does not train them in lactation. I want to say that loud and clear. It does not train them. Some obstetricians have been wonderful and chosen to get training outside of their medical degree about lactation so that they can guide their parents. But it's unreal to me how many people are giving pediatricians and obstetricians are giving lactation advice every single day, and they're severely lacking in any training in it. And they're not saying, this is not my strong. I don't know. Let me get you in touch with someone. Let me give you a referral to somebody who does, who this is their job. This is their specialty. And so please don't go to your pediatrician, obstetrician for breastfeeding advice.
Mm-mm.
I can promise you the doula knows far more about breastfeeding than your pediatrician and obstetrician do.
And she most likely knows exactly who to send you to, right?
Yeah.
I have 4 lactation consultants in my neighborhood in my phone, and I map personality. I'm like, you're going to love this one. Go this one. Like there's one that specializes in ties, you know, like find exactly who is going to help you the best, because they're not only well-trained, but if they have good referral sources, if people are always bringing their names up, that's a good person to talk to. You know, as a doula, I love all my local OBs. They're great, but I work with them during a birth and not on any other process, because that's not their scope of work and it's not mine. I just think we spend so much time talking about how's the baby going to get out? How's the baby going to get out? You pee on the stick. That's all you think about. You read about it, you watch things, and the babies come out. That's a pretty short process. And of course, educate yourself and get a doula and all that stuff, but not enough time on a feeding plan. So we have birth plans, we need feeding plans, and they need to start, that research needs to start when you know there's a child coming that you're going to have to feed, right?
That's right.
And so, you know, every community should have La Leche League. Go sit in a meeting, like listen to what moms who are feeding are talking about. If your hospitals or birthing centers have breastfeeding support groups, just go sit in. Like, don't wait.
Before the baby comes, go do this.
Yes, absolutely. Because, you know, knowledge beforehand is so much better than when you're in the thick of it. You know, if you are home 3 days in and maybe you saw a lactation consultant for 10 minutes at the hospital and you're worried about your baby getting enough, that's the time when we stop and we just send our partner to go get formula because we don't know what we're doing. But if you've trained before, great. You know, seeing if your insurance will pay for a prenatal session with a lactation consultant. Some of them are. And so every possible chance you can get to talk to a specialist, sit in on a group while you're pregnant, the better. Like you're just setting yourself up for better success.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. Your insurance may cover a lactation consultant. A lot of people don't know that. That is a
Yes.
common thing that is covered by insurance. So reach out to your insurance company, find out if it's covered through lactation, and then find a lactation consultant. There's lots of online stuff too now. Lactation
Yes.
support online. There's great virtual apps and people. You can do a lactation consultation right over the phone. We do it all the time with Birthify. It's amazing. You have your partner just hold the phone and I can see the baby's latch. I can see the condition of your nipples. I can see how you're holding them. Like, these are easy things to deal with even virtually. So, you know, don't make I can't get there a reason.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of resources out there.
Absolutely. And a lot of lactation consultants will come to your home, especially in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like, just set up a whole postpartum plan. Who's going to help you walk your dogs, right? You have a new baby and you're maybe wearing a diaper and feeding. Who's going to make sure your older child has some time out of the house on play dates? Who is going to be your number one call when lactation isn't working, right? If you have a whatever service, pelvic floor, whatever you think you might need, have that whole plan built and make sure your support network all knows about it. Like, these are my options. This is my plan for feeding. These are the classes I take. I think partners should take a class too, right? Partners they might not be able to physically breastfeed, but they are a huge part of that journey. And so the more knowledge, the better.
I always teach dads, when your partner sits down to breastfeed, just go get a glass of water, because they're going to ask you for it anyways. The minute that baby latches on, I don't know, I've seen it over and over again. It's so mind-boggling, but the minute that baby latches on, suddenly you're like dying of thirst. You're parched. Like it's literally your body saying like, oh, we need more, and it's just instantaneous. And I would never think to grab a glass before I sat down. So then I'd always be like, babe, I need water. So there's another topic. I know that this could be a whole episode by itself, but I'd like to just dip a little toe into lip and tongue tie. Right? Because
I'm going to say out of my scope of practice, so I will listen, but I'll let you guys talk about it.
Well, I mean, it's out of our scope too, but I think that lip and tongue tie has become so common, and I'm not sure I'm clear on why that is and why it's skyrocketed so much. And I know there's people doing sort of research on it to try and figure it out, but it is a really common thing that people are up against. And I think they're not getting the help that they need quickly enough, because they don't know that it's something that they can do. So I guess since we're just dipping into it, a lip and tongue tie is the little thing underneath your tongue, and then the connecting tissue between your gum and your lip is on the top lip, is the things that we're talking about. And those can be short and not very long. My last baby had it, and it was so interesting. I went to the ENT with him, and he was like almost a year old. And I don't remember even what it was for. I can't recall. But anyways, he said to me, like, you're still breastfeeding? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, his lip and tongue tie are significant. Like, I'm blown away. He said, did it hurt really bad in the beginning? And I was like, yeah, but he was my fourth kid. Like,
right.
By then. And he's like, it's amazing. You can tell it's stretched out quite a bit from just, doing it over and over again. And he's like, but this is pretty severe. And it was just kind of an interesting process. I didn't have any idea. And here I was a doula. I had a lot of experience and just never even bothered to check.
And so if people aren't understanding, like, babies have to open up really wide. And so if they have one of those ties, it's hard to get a latch. So that's the issue. And there are, of course, ways you can have that released. And I've talked to several moms who said, it was so hard. It was so painful. We found this out. We got a release done, night and day difference. So yeah, thinking about why breastfeeding doesn't work, if that was you with your first child and you were always in pain and bleeding and you just didn't know, but you were so dedicated to feeding, you might have struggled for a long time, or you might have given up breastfeeding. And so issues when it's like it's so hard for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the moms are feeling like such a failure. Maybe it's something with the baby, right? Like they're brand new to this as well. But when we think of like, well, why can't women just breastfeed? That's a great example of why.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, obviously, this is a deep subject that we could do, like I said, 10 episodes on breastfeeding and the struggles of breastfeeding and the triumphs of breastfeeding. I breastfed like, you know, the 3 months with my first one, like I mentioned. With my second, I was determined, but then I had to go back to work at 6 weeks postpartum. Like that's another big issue that people face with a long-term breastfeeding issue. So then I was just pumping at work and it was great. My company was great. We worked in a very small space and my boss gave me his office every day, twice a day for a 15-minute break. And I would use my breaks, by the way, my work breaks. I would just sit in his office and pump. There were no phones, so I couldn't even scroll phones while I was sitting there. I think I'd read a book or something. But very quickly, you cannot keep your supply up when you're only pumping twice a day. But that was all I could do. And then I would just nurse him at night. But pretty quickly, by I think 3 months, he was already needing to be supplemented. Because the daycare provider was like, he's drinking it like that, and it's not enough. And so I had to start, just mixing it and supplementing more and supplementing more. And then right around 4 months, he started refusing nursing. And he just, in the middle of the night, one night, I tried to give him the breast and he just screamed bloody murder. He was just not having it. And so I ran and got a formula bottle and then he sucked it right down. But he just refused to breastfeed. And that was it. That was the end of it. And so when it came to my last baby, then this is my other breastfeeding. My breastfeeding journey has been crazy. Then with my third kid, now I'm a doula. I've been a doula for 10 plus years. I know it. I've been teaching people, helping people. I'm going to do awesome. Breastfeeding goes great. I mean, I initially have all of the pain and discomfort and all of that. It's going really well. And then I get pregnant though really quickly. My two youngest are only 13 months apart. So I was 4 months postpartum when I found out I was having another baby. And I was already 9 weeks pregnant. So I got pregnant that part. Anyways, during my first prenatal visit, my midwife said, how's your breast milk supply? And I said, it's fine. I mean, I think it's fine. And, I wasn't pumping or anything, so I really had no idea. And then, I realized like within a couple of weeks that my baby was crying a lot more. She was very fussy. She had a hard time going to sleep. She wasn't sleeping well at night and she'd been sleeping great. I thought she was teething or something. So I was giving her Tylenol. I was doing, all these other things. And then one day I was changing her diaper and I realized the little fat pad that babies get right under their belly button, it was normally a little squishy, was not only gone, but the skin was wrinkly, like when you lose weight fast. And it suddenly like bing, like light bulb went on. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not feeding her enough food. Like my supply has tanked because I'm pregnant. I'm newly pregnant. And I just didn't think that was a thing. I didn't think that was possible. I just thought I'm doing all the right things. And so I went downstairs and I grabbed a bottle of formula and she sucked down 2 ounces so fast. I had been starving her basically for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. It was, I never felt so guilty about something in my life.
That's something that should be taught prenatally. Women should know this, right?
Yeah.
But, that's another issue of like, you don't go back to see your doctor for 6 weeks after you've had a baby. 6 weeks. A lot of things can happen in 6 weeks, and it should be talked about then. I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's kind of like, the longer you work in this field, the more we just know all this great stuff. And I tell people all the time little factoids, and they're just like, I've had 3 children. I had no idea. Well, let's start talking to the women who are newly pregnant and telling them all this knowledge, right? We don't need to save it all. Let's just let them enjoy pregnancy and worry about their birth plan. Like, nope, we're going to give you all the information and we're going to repeat it all the time and then tell you again right after the baby's there.
Right. Because you'll forget, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm happy to say my 4th kid, I breastfed him until he was 3.5. So I went, completely the opposite extreme. He is by far my most healthy kid. He's now 14 and 6 foot tall. Of course, 6 foot tall is more genetics than anything, but he's rarely sick. Rarely. I mean, I can count on one hand how many times the kid's ever even gotten the stomach flu. Like, he just doesn't get sick. And if he does, it's like 24 hours. He'll get a super high fever. He'll have it for 24 hours and then he's done.
Amazing.
Like if he gets a cold, it's mild at best. He's been on antibiotics one time in his life, and it was because he got severe strep throat. Only time.
Well, we have all this knowledge about how mothers pass down antibodies to their children, which is so amazing. And then if the child is sick, of course, their milk changes and, to be more protective. But thinking about donor milk, if you have to, most likely you're not going to find one donor for your entire breastfeeding experience. So if you have a handful of other women who have given you their milk, you're getting all of their antibodies too. Talk about healthy babies. Like,
I love that. I love that you brought that up, because so when I was using the most donor milk with my daughter, it was 2022. So right after the COVID era. And I personally didn't get COVID. So I didn't have those antibodies. But all my friends, like I said, that, were helping me, they definitely had it 1-2 times. And I was able to, get those antibodies. And people are like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, it's because they have them and I don't. And I mean, our whole family has been very lucky, if we're knock on wood, because we're all sick right now with some, whatever bug, but we never really got that and I think mainly because of the breast milk that was, in my daughter. And my husband's an anomaly. He just never gets sick with anything. I don't understand. But yeah. And also just different other things as well. Like how many bugs and variations of viruses and infections can be. And that is all immune boosting in the breast milk. And additionally, my one friend was vegan and avocados, walnuts, she had really fatty milk, and she has these really chunky little babies. And my milk was, always kind of thinner because I don't necessarily love avocados, and stuff like that. So you're also yes, there's different variations of diet and what is in breast milk, but that's great, really.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyways, well, in this conversation, I'm thinking of 3 other things that I could ask or talk about, but I'm realizing we're getting to the end of our time together, and it might not be good to just dive into another part of this, but it just goes to show you there's so much, dang it. There's so much to talk about, when it comes to breast milk and, AM milk versus PM milk and the magic that happens if you get sick or your child gets sick that you're breastfeeding and immediately the content of your milk changes. I mean, there's research about this. If your baby has a cold, your breast milk will change to give them the support that they need for their immune system to help them navigate the cold. I mean, wow. That kind of shit is, sorry, excuse my language. that kind of stuff is like mind blowing. And it just goes to show you the body is perfection when it is given everything that it needs. And it is the perfect thing for our babies. And
I just got an email last week from a user and said, I got this breast milk. It was freshly pumped and just newly frozen. And so it's good for a while. But she said there's 2 bags that say sick on them. And I said, did you ask your donor? She's like, oh yeah, her toddler and her baby were sick. And I said, great. I said, it's good for 6 months in the freezer. Wait, like save that until your baby might have something. You're like, you have a toddler who's coming home, bringing up all this stuff, like wait. And when the toddler passes the yuck to the baby, you thaw that breast milk and that's when to use it. And she was like, oh, I would never think about this.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's such a cool discussion topic. I wish I knew more about it. I don't honestly, but all I know is like I've never gone into lactation training or anything like that. Formal anyways. I've done all the basic sort of stuff, but no IBLs, ILBLs, whatever those acronyms are. And so there's some of that stuff that I'm like, man, I just know the the little headlines to everything to share because I'm still always fascinated. But I'd love to have somebody on the podcast that could really deep dive into the science of these things, the research, because it's so cool.
Yeah. I would listen.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, Kelly, we ask this of all of our guests, and I'm going to wrap this call up today. First of all, thanks for being on here. But when it comes to the village, who do you think is the most critical support besides what you do from a lactation standpoint for families in what they need in their village? Sorry, that was
IBCLC every day. Find an IBCLC. Yeah. They are the training to get that credentialing is so long. You have to have so many hours under your belt. The test is a lot. Like those are the experts. So but 2 things. So go find some sort of breastfeeding support group when you're pregnant, and then find a lactation consultant who is board certified. And that's your best tool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. People don't understand. It's like almost like taking the bar exam, the lactation exam or the medical exam to get your medical license. It is very, very in-depth and serious and to accomplish, and it takes tremendous training and hours. So yeah, for sure. Well,
and find one that takes your insurance, because parenthood is very expensive and you're going to have all these other things you have to pay for. So call your insurance, figure out what's covered, and then make that.
And this is a perfect reason why you should be doing it before you have your baby, because when you're sitting there with cracked, bleeding nipples, the last thing you're going to want to do is find out through your insurance who's covered, where they are, if they have availability. Like you don't need to be figuring that stuff out but after you've had a baby, because you won't. But the likelihood of you doing it is significantly low. So do yourself a favor. If you're pregnant right now and you're listening to this, go find the person now. Just get them in line. Anyways, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. What a fun, cool conversation. It's been great. And your insight has been really powerful and helpful. And I'm so excited about your Share the Drop app. That information will be in the show notes. So if you need access, it'll be there for you to find. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Speaking of the Village. If you love today's episode, make sure to hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
And remember, you're not alone. We're here, we're listening, and we're all in this together, because in our village, no mom walks alone.